Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another fascinating exploration?
Always.
Today we're diving deep into Neville Goddard's unique perspective on the Bible.
Ah, Neville Goddard. Always a mind-bending journey.
Precisely. We'll be focusing on his ideas about interpreting the Bible, especially what he says about the relationship between God, humanity, and this idea of being one with God.
Oneness, a central theme in Goddard's work.
Absolutely. And our primary source for this deep dive is an excerpt from one of his lectures, which is rich in symbolism and personal anecdotes.
Always love those. Makes it so much more engaging, right?
I agree. So, to kick things off, what really struck me was how Goddard emphasizes the Bible as salvation history.
Right. He encourages us to move away from that literal historical interpretation.
It's like he's saying, forget about the historical events. The real journey is an inner spiritual one.
Exactly. He's shifting the focus from external events to the internal transformation each individual goes through.
So, it's not about what happened thousands of years ago, but about what's happening within us right now.
Precisely. Instead of a history book, the Bible becomes like a guide for inner transformation.
A roadmap for our own personal quest to connect with the divine.
I like that, a roadmap. And that's what makes Goddard's interpretation so unique. It's all about that personal experiential approach.
He uses the example of the Exodus story, right?
Yes, he suggests it's not just about the Israelites escaping Egypt, but about each of us escaping those limitations of our own ego.
Our own Egypt, so to speak.
Exactly, breaking free from those self-imposed boundaries.
So how does this whole salvation history idea tie into his interpretation of the greatest commandment?
Ah, yes. The declaration, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one."
He seems to really hone in on that idea of oneness.
Well, unity with God is at the very core of everything Goddard teaches.
And to illustrate it, he uses that rather unusual mathematical equation,
1 + 1 = 1. God's arithmetic, as he calls it.
where our individual soul merges with God to achieve true oneness.
It's not about two separate things becoming one, but rather recognizing that we were never truly separate to begin with.
Whoa, okay. That's pretty mind-blowing. But if we become one with God, do we lose our individual identity?
That's a great question. It's more like a return to a state of unity that has always existed.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. It makes you wonder about the experiences that led him to this interpretation.
While we don't have those specific details from this lecture, his focus on oneness permeates all of his work with the Bible.
He also brings in this really interesting metaphor of marriage to describe the relationship between God and humanity,
Yeah, he draws on Isaiah's description of God as a husband.
highlighting that deep intimacy and commitment between the divine and each individual soul.
Not a distant authoritarian God, but a loving personal connection.
And then he introduces all this intriguing symbolism around places like Zion, Bethlehem, the city of God, the city of David.
Instead of seeing them as literal locations, Goddard interprets these places as symbols of an inner spiritual state.
They represent that promised land within each of us.
Precisely. It's that state of awakened consciousness where we realize our oneness with God.
I'm especially intrigued by how he talks about being buried in the city of David.
It does sound a bit morbid at first, right?
Yeah, but then he connects it to spiritual awakening. It's a powerful image.
It really is. It suggests letting go of our ego, surrendering to something larger than ourselves, and ultimately experiencing a rebirth.
A rebirth or awakening to our true spiritual identity.
Exactly. Shedding the old to embrace the new.
So where does King David fit into all of this?
Goddard sees David as the embodiment of awakened consciousness within each of us.
Is he connecting this to the bigger picture of Jesus Christ? Like the Old Testament hinting at what comes in the New Testament?
Precisely. He views the New Testament as a reinterpretation of David's journey, but focused on Christ.
Okay, I'm following, and this is where it gets even more interesting. Goddard says that when this David within us awakens, he calls us Father.
It's a powerful concept, isn't it?
It definitely challenges traditional Christian interpretations. So, are you saying that when we reach this awakened state, we realize our own divinity and become the Father?
That's the core of Goddard's message. A radical shift in perspective.
Now, he makes this rather provocative comparison. He says, those who believe in a God outside themselves are like a harlot, while the Virgin gives birth to the Christ within.
It's strong imagery, for sure.
It is. What do you make of that?
I think he's contrasting a state of spiritual dependency on outside forces, the harlot, with that self-sufficiency and power to connect with the divine within, the Virgin.
It's about owning your spiritual authority.
Exactly, stepping into your own power.
He even shares a dream one of his friends had about a woman named Glory.
Ah, yes. Glory, who has 12 daughters, 11 with disabilities, but the one who is a virgin gives birth to a son.
And people are obsessed with finding out who the father is, even threatening the son.
It's an allegory packed with symbolism.
What do you think it's trying to tell us?
I think it speaks to the pushback we often face when we embrace our own spiritual power.
It's like society wants us to stay dependent on those external authorities, to stay in that harlot state instead of trusting our own inner divinity.
That's a profound observation. Definitely something to ponder on our own spiritual journeys.
And just when I thought it couldn't get any more mind-bending, he hits us with this analogy of the universe as an infinite brain.
An infinite brain with God as the dreamer.
And we, the individual souls, are like brain cells within that divine mind.
It's such a beautiful way to illustrate that concept of unity, the interconnectedness of everything.
So we're all part of this massive cosmic dream, and the goal is to awaken and realize we're part of the dreamer.
Yes, it's the ultimate goal of spiritual awakening.
The idea that each of us could become the dreamer is awe-inspiring.
It really challenges our understanding of our place in the grand scheme of things.
It does. He does touch upon a simple law for navigating the material world, but he quickly shifts back to the primary message of spiritual transformation.
He acknowledges that we still live in this material world with all its challenges and desires.
He uses the example of Jacob to illustrate this, right? Jacob, who represents that focus on worldly success.
Right. He manipulates situations and gains material wealth using this simple law.
But ultimately, Goddard seems to imply that this kind of success is temporary and less fulfilling.
It's almost like he's saying, sure, you can use this law to get ahead in the world, but don't lose sight of the real goal.
Awakening the David within and realizing your oneness with God.
Exactly. The true riches come from spiritual awakening.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Don't lose sight of the real goal. And it reminds me of how he contrasts Jacob with David. Jacob representing worldly success and David symbolizing spiritual awakening.
Right. And he even gives the example of Jacob deceiving his father-in-law Laban to gain material wealth.
It sounds like he's acknowledging that there are ways to manipulate the material world using this simple law, but
True fulfillment comes from spiritual awakening.
not from external achievements.
Mm.
And in the end, both Jacob and David are part of that larger whole, that infinite brain we talked about.
It's all God, just unfolding in different ways.
That infinite brain analogy, it really captures the imagination.
It really does, doesn't it?
Makes you question the very nature of reality. It challenges the idea that we're these isolated individuals.
Instead, we are interconnected parts of a vast cosmic consciousness.
So how does this infinite brain idea actually connect to spiritual awakening?
Well, imagine each brain cell in that infinite brain as a soul.
Okay, I'm imagining it.
When a soul awakens, it realizes its connection to the whole, It understands that it's not separate, but an integral part of the divine mind.
So as more souls awaken, the infinite brain becomes more alive, more aware.
Exactly. It's a collective awakening, a gradual unfolding of that divine consciousness.
It's like we're all playing a role in the evolution of the universe. Fascinating.
It really is.
Speaking of roles, Goddard talks about a simple law for navigating the material world,
But as we touched on earlier, it seems secondary to his message of spiritual transformation.
he acknowledges that we still live in this material world with all its challenges and desires, but
He doesn't want us to get too caught up in it.
he uses the example of Jacob to illustrate this, right?
Yeah.
Jacob, who represents that focus on worldly success.
Right.
He manipulates situations and gains material wealth using this simple law, but ultimately,
Goddard seems to imply that this kind of success is temporary, less fulfilling than the true riches that come from spiritual awakening.
it's almost like he's saying, sure, you can use this law to get ahead in the world, but don't lose sight of the real goal. Awakening the David within and realizing your oneness with God.
Right. It's not about rejecting the material world entirely,
Right.
but about shifting our perspective.
It's about aligning ourselves with what Goddard calls those gates of Zion,
Yes.
that inner state of spiritual awareness rather than chasing after those external goals and possessions.
He contrasts those gates of Zion with the dwelling places of Jacob, saying that God prefers the former.
Can you elaborate on that a little?
Sure. So Jacob represents that relentless pursuit of worldly success,
Yeah.
While Zion symbolizes that inner state of spiritual awakening, God, or that divine consciousness, favors the latter.
Okay.
It's a reminder that true fulfillment comes from within.
So how do we apply this to our everyday lives?
That's the question, isn't it?
How do we shift our focus from those dwelling places of Jacob to the gates of Zion?
I think it begins with awareness.
Awareness.
Yeah, noticing when we're getting caught up in the pursuit of external things.
Whether it's wealth, status, even relationships.
Right.
And then making a conscious choice to turn inward, cultivate a connection with that inner divinity.
Exactly. It's about practicing presence, being mindful of our thoughts and actions.
And making choices that align with our spiritual goals.
Yes.
It's about remembering that we are not separate from God, but expressions of God.
That our true power comes from within.
And as we awaken to this truth, as we align ourselves with those gates of Zion, we start experiencing a deeper sense of peace, joy, and fulfillment that no amount of worldly success can provide.
Absolutely. It's a journey of self-discovery, shedding old beliefs, embracing a new understanding of who we really are.
It's about moving from a state of spiritual dependence, like that harlot in Goddard's analogy, to a state of self-sufficiency, like the virgin who gives birth to the Christ within.
Owning our spiritual authority and realizing that we are not just brain cells in an infinite brain.
But the dreamer itself.
Exactly. And as more and more of us awaken to this, we contribute to that collective awakening of the infinite brain.
Bringing that divine dream to life.
And this reminds me of Goddard's description of David, the symbol of awakened consciousness, calling us Father when he arises within us.
What a powerful image.
It is.
It really speaks to that profound shift in identity that happens when we awaken to our true nature.
We go from seeing ourselves as these separate individuals to recognizing our inherent divinity.
Our oneness with God.
And this isn't just some abstract idea.
Right.
It's a lived experience that changes how we relate to ourselves, to others, to the world around us.
You mentioned earlier that dream Goddard's friend had about a woman named Glory, who gives birth to a son and people trying to figure out who the father is and even threaten the son. What are your thoughts on that?
It seems like an allegory for the resistance we encounter when we embrace our own spiritual power.
Like there are forces, both internal and external, that try to keep us playing small, prevent us from reaching our full potential.
Perhaps it's the fear of the unknown, the discomfort of challenging those deeply ingrained beliefs.
Or even the ego's resistance to surrender.
Could be. But it seems the message is that the truth can't be silenced. That sun, representing our awakened consciousness, will always find a way to emerge, shine its light into the world.
It's a reminder that our spiritual journey is not always easy, but
it's ultimately a journey worth taking.
It's about overcoming the challenges, the doubts, the fears.
And stepping into our full power as expressions of the divine.
And in doing so, we inspire others to do the same.
Contributing to the collective awakening of humanity.
Inspiring others, exactly. And it all ties back to that line from the lecture, "Let no man put asunder what God has joined together."
We are already joined with God, with that divine consciousness.
It's a matter of remembering.
Yeah, of waking up to that truth.
Is that what Goddard means by being born again?
Exactly. Not a literal rebirth, but that spiritual shift.
Yeah.
A transformation of consciousness.
Yeah.
And it's through that transformation that we realize, really realize, that we are one with God.
So we move beyond this idea of me separate from God and realize, like you said, that we're the same. But then what? What does that actually look like, in our daily lives?
I think it shows up as a deep sense of peace, a knowing that everything is as it should be.
That feeling of connection to something so much bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
A sense of purpose, of belonging.
But it also brings a profound sense of responsibility.
Responsibility? In what way?
Well, if we truly are one with God, then we're also responsible for the state of the world.
Oh, I see.
Our thoughts, our actions, even just our being, impacts that collective consciousness.
So it's not just about personal enlightenment, but about, making the world a better place.
Exactly. Living from a place of love, compassion, and understanding. Using that awareness to create a more just and harmonious world.
Goddard mentions that our first impression of God might be one of destructive violence. But that's not the whole picture, right?
Right.
What do you think he's getting at there?
I think he's acknowledging that spiritual awakening can be intense, even unsettling. There might be challenges, setbacks, things that feel like destruction.
Like that image of being buried in the city of David.
Yeah, exactly. There's a death, a letting go of old ways of being before the rebirth and awakening can happen.
That destructive violence could also refer to dismantling our old belief systems, shattering the illusions we hold about ourselves and the world.
It's like shaking up a snow globe. Everything falls apart so it can settle into a new, more beautiful pattern.
I like that. And through this process, we come to see God not as this distant, judgmental figure, but
As
as...
infinite love.
And that love, that infinite love, is what unites us all.
It's the glue that holds that infinite brain together, the force that connects us as one.
Goddard's teachings can be, mind-bending and challenging at times, but
But they also offer a profound sense of hope.
hope that we aren't alone, that we're part of something so much greater than ourselves, and that we have the power to create a better world.
And that power comes from within.
From recognizing our own divinity, our oneness with God,
It's about choosing those gates of Zion over those dwelling places of Jacob.
letting that divine love shine through our thoughts, our words, our actions.
Living a life that reflects who we really are. Spiritual beings. Expressions of the divine.
Well, this deep dive into Neville Goddard's perspective has been truly eye-opening.
It's challenged us to reconsider our understanding of the Bible of God and of ourselves.
And it's given us a glimpse into a world of infinite possibilities, where we're not just brain cells, but the dreamer itself.
As you go about your day, remember Goddard's words. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Let them resonate within you and guide you on your own journey of spiritual awakening.
Until next time, fellow deep divers, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never forget who you truly are.